Hey everybody, Joe Tr- Joe Tritola here. The recording thing was telling me it was being recorded. In case you didn't know, we record these. I'm here with the infamous one and only Larry, Mr. K, Kornblum. Um, how I would describe Larry, we've known each other for several years. Larry is not only a client of ours, which he's entrusted us, but he's also our client care coordinator. He runs the customer service department. When I first interviewed Larry on the phone, Andrew asked me, well, what did you think of this guy? And I said, I love him. I said, I fell in love with his personality right away. So Andrew said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means like he's the kind of guy that I just want to lay in bed and watch TV with all day. And that's really the way that I would describe you. You're definitely a man's man, and very, very likable person. And we have you in the role for a reason. And the purpose of this interview is I wanted agents to know about how important it is to have client service policies and procedures and workflows put in place. So I thought that we would, kind of do this interview a little bit different. And I always start with, how did you get started in insurance? So I'm going to start with that question. In just a couple of sentences, without telling us that you used to work for Warner Brothers. What is it that led you to get started in insurance?
Well, honestly, it was by accident. I was working. I tried to retire, believe it or not, when I was about 57. It didn't work out because I was going to lose my mind. So I took a little position as a lead in a small company that was called Rewards Network, which actually rewarded customers on their airline mileage just for using restaurants. Anyway, in the same building, there was a small insurance company that opened up. And I'll make this very quickly, is just speaking to the agents and everything, ended up chatting with the owner one day out on breaks or lunch or before work or after work, and told me, oh, you should come in and see my head of HR department. He's a great guy. Maybe we could use somebody like yourself. And after being with the Rewards Network company for 3.5 years, I decided to give it a look and had a conversation. And I said, you know what? This sounds really cool. So I got into the insurance agency, got my 215 license, became an insurance agent. Did that for about 13, 14 months, was doing U65, which is peculiar product to begin with. After about 13 or 14 months, they were opening up a new site down in Doral. I put my hat into the circle there, and they said, okay, we'd like you to run Doral. And I became the site director of Doral, literally for about 2.5 to 3 years, and ended up running another U65 office in Miami Lakes for some great, really good people, small office, which was okay with me. And after they really couldn't make ends meet, went more into the dental field, the dental insurance. Was just looking for a job, came across the ad and spoke to Joe on the telephone. And as Joe tells you so many nice things about me, it was nice to hear. Well, I can tell you the same thing about Joe. Loved the interview, loved that when I went up to see Joe and Andrew, when I met them, they said magical words. I was done with the U65 product. They were starting a Medicare office, which was Medicare Supplement and Medicare Advantage, which I really knew nothing about. But funny as it seems, I had just turned 65. So it all seemed to come into place. The magical words, though, believe it or not, that I heard and that I liked is we do everything honestly, we do everything above board, and we do everything compliantly. And we want all of the agents to talk to the clients like they're talking to their parents. I laughed and said, well, basically, you mean like talking to me. So that was initially how I took the position that was going to be as an agent. And after a very short time, we had a couple of gentlemen to come in to try to do the customer service and onboarding and certain things in the agency, and they just didn't work out. And I threw my name again into the hat and sat down with Joe and Andrew and said, listen, I'd be more than happy to do this. I've been in sales my whole entire life. And you know what? I could run the customer service department.
I remember we had that one guy, I can't remember his name, but he came from the title insurance industry, the guy with the moppy hair.
I remember
every day that his brain felt like guacamole. Do you remember he was supposed to be our customer service rep back
Yeah.
then? And
Yeah.
and for those that you don't know, at the time, Andrew and Advocate My Insurance, they were just the downline of Nation Care, and so I was helping them get set up as an upline. And that gentleman, I'll never forget, like he went to lunch one day, and I saw him drive away. And he was just shaking his head like this, and we never saw him again.
And that was
Because it
it.
was
No.
just overwhelming. The whole like trying to understand how Medicare works to him was just so overwhelming. So we're glad you took the role. As a result of March of last year, when we had to shut the office down due to COVID, and I'm going to put a little hint out there. I am currently in quarantine because I may or may not have COVID. I have a positive test and a negative test, so we're waiting for the PCR to come back from the lab. But I have all the symptoms. And I did get the vaccine, at least the first one. And so back in March, when we all had to go home, Larry was, of course, sent home where he's there now with his dog. And Larry has since worked from home ever since.
Special guest.
Big deal. So tell us a little bit about, a day in the life of customer service. Before we recorded this, we always talk about what we're going to talk about. And I think it's important to discuss what some of the fears the consumers have post-sale. So everybody just has a quick little background. Larry handles the customer service for our call center. So agent signs the client up on the appropriate policy and plan. The agent has to build out this very extensive file with all these documents that are required. Larry, we're not going to get into that. I'm going to do that on a separate training. And then we schedule what's called a next day or the day after welcome call. And a lot of times, I wouldn't say a lot, but Larry, talk to everyone, tell everyone what are some of the fears and concerns that clients generally have on post-sale?
Well, think about it. You're dealing with literally the vast majority of the clients are 65 and older, 97, 98%, maybe even more. The first fear is picking up the telephone. Once you get over that and you do get the client on the telephone and you're able to speak to Mr. or Mrs. Client, whatever the case may be, and you could first thing you try to do is to break down the wall by telling them exactly who you are. You introduce yourself. You also introduce who you spoke to yesterday and the policy that they discussed, whether you spoke to Diane or to Andre, and you guys discussed the Humana policy. You're trying to break down a wall to show the legitimacy of your phone call in the first place. Once you get past that and they say, oh, yeah, sure, no, I did. And then I always explain to them, they did tell you were going to get a little bit of a welcome call today and that it was going to be extremely painless. And then they laugh a little. I laugh a little bit and we say, okay. And then I try to explain the telephone call to them. Look, people over 65, and myself included, we get a lot of these phone calls and a ton of them. All they really want to do is make sure they're not being scammed. They want to make sure they're not being taken advantage of. When they get somebody who's a soothing voice, who seems to understand their plight, who's in the same exact position as of them, and I tell them, look, I understand the hesitancy. I get these calls, the same ones that you do. So don't think just because I'm a licensed insurance agent and I work for an agency that I don't get the same phone calls, because I do. So I understand. So let me tell you, this is a painless phone call. I'm going to go over 3 parts of the phone call with you before I get into it. I'm going to give you my full name and my contact number because I'm a good guy to know. I run the customer service department. And believe it or not, this is Medicare. This is insurance. It's going to come in handy come down the line. The second thing is I'm going to do is go over what I see in your file just to make sure it's everything that you heard. Because, of course, at our ages, we don't like any surprises. So I just want to go over that with you. The third thing I'm going to do, the last 30 seconds of the conversation, is I'm going to go over your general information, make sure that it's complete and that it's correct, so I don't have to call the carrier after you get your card and your policy. I could do that now if there is any corrections to be made. And then at the end, I will just ask you if you have any questions or concerns for me to go over. So that's generally how the initial welcome call starts. And then we go from there. I give them all the information. We go over that. Usually the phone call ends up very, very nice. And of course, either they'll have a question then, a lot of times, believe it or not, you have to go over some or reiterate some of the information that was just given to them a day prior. You know, they took it in, but they didn't take it in, especially people T65ing. So you may have to go over a few of the benefits on their policy, if it's a D-SNP or whatever the case may be. On a supplement,
you're basically just reiterating the benefits. You're letting them know that, you know, there's someone there that's there for them, and that they now have a single point of
contact. Yeah. Okay.
Which is huge, you know, because clients call in. I take the calls sometimes, and they're like, I am only speaking to Larry. So
well, because
it's on the phone.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth. It's to make the connection. Mm-hmm. As in fact, as you and I were talking about it before, Joe, is a good customer service department is like having a retention department and a customer service department all in one. That's what it is. It is a connection. People like to have a connection with somebody. People like a rapport. They like to know they're speaking to the same person. Look, let's take Comcast or AT&T or anything that you have in your wallet or anything that you're signed up with. You call in 12 times. I call a carrier 12 times. Guess what? You get 12 different agents. You get 12 different customer service reps. If you call in the same department and you keep getting the same person, number one, legitimizes the whole thing. The person's still there. I've called 2, 3, 4 times. Number two is I know they're going to help me. It's a friendly voice. It's a voice that I know I can always count on to help me. Look, that's all we ask for. That's all that senior citizens ask for, is not to be taken advantage, number one. And to number two is for somebody to listen to me, to hear me. And it's if I call in and I ask for help, then guess what? I need the help. Mm-hmm. And whether I should just go over their summary of benefits with them and explain something simple, or if I need to call the carrier with the client, they see that part too. That's why I say to you that a customer service department, or a good one, is like having a retention department 2 in 1. Because if you call a Humana or a United with the client and have their problem resolved, let me tell you something. You have a client, and you're going to keep that client because they know you went the extra yard for them. And that's all they want. It's pretty simple. And I know it sounds funny, but a lot of times simple is what works. It's an old-fashioned way of, look, when I do the checking in calls now, Joe, it's very funny. When I get the person or the client on the telephone, I always tell them, I just want you to understand something. This is customer service the old-fashioned way, where we actually call the client. We don't forget about you. We're just checking in on you. We don't need anything or want anything. We're just making sure that you and the policy that you have is working for you. Absolutely. And that's what I do.
And it's invaluable what you do. So again, I think it's very important that agents understand that, when you're going to bring your agency to the next level, and you're going to be bringing in sub agents and, support staff and whatnot, you want to build it from the back outward. And that is you want to build the client service, customer care, whatever you want to label the department, you want to build it out that way, because the experience, the journey that the client's going to have is going to determine whether or not they're going to stay wholeheartedly.
100%.
What else I know the answer, but what else do we do? So what happens when the policy becomes activated? What do you put in the mail?
Oh, when the policy becomes
the returns.
As we go, literally, I check I want to say every, but basically every policy that's in submission in the carriers. When I find the carrier has then approved, we take the member ID number, put the member ID into our file. At that point, I try to give them another telephone call to give them their member ID. And at that point, also, we turn around and we send a little thank you card. Comes with a few business cards, a magnet in there for them. So, and we update their file. So whether if it's a supplement and a PDP, whether if it's a Medicare Advantage policy, whatever the case may be. But again, it's that constant contact. Would you like your member ID? I was just in United. I see that your policy has been approved. I have the information for you. Again, somebody like United, which is great. I'm not only able to put in their member ID number, but all of their RX information in case the card comes late. It doesn't come. How many times have we run across that? I never got my card. I never got my policy pages. So, look, it still goes back to just doing it the way that it's supposed to be done. I know that sounds real easy, but it's not difficult. It's just doing what needs to be done, which is constant contact with your client. And exactly like you said, that's why we put procedures into place, the welcome call, checking with the carrier, and then the call back to the client, letting them know what is transpired, and then the thank you card. So it all goes along. And then a few months later, or however long, a checking in call and making sure that they're not having any problems or difficulties. You don't have to wait for them to call you.
Right. That's the whole point, is to be proactive. And I have another question. Now I remembered, I made a note, but now I remembered what made me think of doing this the other day. Someone had posted in one of the Facebook groups. It was kind of a Quizlet, and it was, what do you say has been taking up the most of your time? And there was like 8 choices. One of them was contracting, one of them was calling leads, one of them was driving. But the one that got the most hits was assisting members with claims, assisting clients with claims. And it made me think, you do a lot of work for our clients, but I know for sure you're not doing a tremendous amount of claims assistance.
And that's correct.
And before you answer,
we don't do a tremendous amount of claims.
Let me tell you what my thought is on that, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I thought about that, and I said to myself, okay, the 35 or 40 agents that clicked claim assistance, I looked at the list of the agents, and the ones that I was aware of, more than 3/4 of them, they were all sole practitioners, single independent agents, non-call center, non-agency based agents. And it made me think, we have, I don't know the number is, so I'm fictitiously going to say something in the air. I could be off by a couple of hundred, but we got 3,000 clients, 3,500 that come through this particular channel. Not total clients, but from this channel. So call it 3,000. Could be 2,700. I have no idea.
Right. No, you're right around there.
So we have, probably 6 to 7 times more than the standard independent agent who's been in business for 4 years, right? 100 clients a year, 4 years.
Right.
And here we are. I am not aware of hardly any claims processing help that you assist with. And it's not that you won't. That's what you're paid to do. You're paid to help in all areas of the client. Do you get a lot of requests for claims assistance? The answer is no. And here's why I think why. Because our process in the file, so when the agent sells the plan, right, or enrolls the plan, whatever language we want to use, the agent has to build the file out. They have to do a lot of different things. Every box has to have the information in it, city and state where born, height and weight if it's a med sup, Medicare ID number, Part A, Part B effective dates. There's a little spot that they got to put their medications in. They got to put a tab down for the policy, the effective date, the deductible if there is one, the activation date. I mean, there's a million little data points that they have to put in. We also require a copy of the scope of an appointment form for obvious reasons. 2, a copy of the enrollment application from Sunfire or Medicare Center for obvious reasons. We asked them to put a copy of the summary benefits in the file, right? How helpful is that for you?
Biggest help.
Huge help. They're required to put the summary benefits. They have to take a screenshot of every doctor, right? And put that in the file, or at least proof that the doctor's in the network. They got to do a screenshot of the meds that they analyzed, and then the pricing of the meds from the screen that they looked at that the consumer received. So when the consumer calls and screams and says it's $400, we say, well, that's why. So we do such a good job with all these bullet points of the files. It is almost like indisputable that we are putting the client in the most probable situation that's going to be the best outcome for them based upon the way that we do business. So therefore, why would there be any issues with claims? Why would there be any issues with, network issues? Why would there be any issues with, whether drugs are covered or not? Because we front load the whole job, hardcore. And I think that's the reason. I'm
going to explain something to you, Joe, because I think I agree with you with 100%. The ones that you do get whether they knew it or not, or whether they forgot it or not, big problem with a lot of seniors is that they kind of knew that it wasn't in their policy or that it wasn't covered. So a lot of times if you go over the summary of benefit with them and you look through it and you say, okay, Mrs. Strange, let me go through this with you. And you go through their summary of benefits. You say, oh, well, here's the portion. You're right. It looks like it was covered. Very seldom and then we'll call the carrier. And believe it or not, we get it straightened out. But most of the times, if you get any of those claim calls and you just reiterate that it is in your policy and this is what it said, and they have a copy and they never read through it, and that's okay. But when you reiterate it, that it is in their policy and this is what they were supposed to get and that's what they got,
Right.
then they back down and they go, oh, well, yeah, you know what? I really never looked at that.
There was about 8 answers to that question. What takes up the most amount of your time? And there was about 50 respondees, maybe 60 respondees. 30 of them plus said claims problems. So that would lead me to believe that 50% of the time they're dealing with claims problems, right? That's their biggest time thing. We're not even in the same realm of that. We're maybe 1% of
maybe
less than that of claims problems, and we have a voluminous amount of clientele. So it makes me, like I said, it makes me wonder: is are we eliminating claims-based questions because we're doing such a very thorough job? We have trained our agents to the T. It's overkill, but it's perfect kill. It is thorough to build a file. In fact, they don't get paid their commission unless their file is correct.
Well, listen,
right?
90% of the customers that I speak to, or maybe 95%, and going back to that and to the explanation of their benefits is exactly that. When I get the person on the phone and I tell them who their agent was and what policy they have, and at the end, when I ask them for any questions, they always say, oh, no, whoever it was, so-and-so was so professional, was so went over everything. 90% of the times, they don't have a question for me. You know what I mean? Meaning they're satisfied. They've gotten the explanation, or they asked their 12 questions prior, and they've gotten their answers. So
very, very thorough. We have very little fallout. It's so the reason I'm going to the theme of customer care, client service, and whatnot was based upon this poll question that I read. And it made me realize that, well, maybe if we can deliver the message to others that if you front load the file, you can eliminate the follow through client questions in the future.
It'll save their time.
Of course.
Look, the summary of benefits is the Bible. It's your Bible.
Absolutely. And then we
send
that out to them
post-sale as well. The summary of benefits is there.
Yeah.
It's your Bible, Joe.
It's true. And that's why we put it in the client file, because we want, when the customer calls in, we don't want anybody scrambling to get the answer. You want to click 2 buttons and then boom, the answer's right there. So
that's right.
Difference. So perfect. Yeah. Well, I appreciate this, Larry. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. In fact, it's always my pleasure to talk to you, Joe. Joe's my buddy.
What dog is that?
What? I'm sorry?
What's the dog's name?
Oh, that was Murphy. Soft-coated Wheaten Terrier.
I got Chloe over here and I got Jax in the other room.
Well, I got Riley laying on the floor now. Murphy switched to a different couch.
Okay.
So we could look out the fishbowl, better known as the living room window, to make sure that the block is safe.
Well, let's end with one last question. And this is the one I always end with. What advice would you have for the new agent that's either just got licensed and is joining the Medicare team, or a new agent that has done other things in insurance and is just coming over to the Medicare side? What advice would you have?
Talk about that, and I'm going to answer that pretty simply, because I come from U65, being an agent and running a 90-seat call center, to now dealing in Medicare. Really simple. Here's the answers. Doesn't take a genius. Speak to the people like you care. Speak to them like you're speaking to your parents. Make it understandable. Don't speak to them like in insurance terms. Make it so it's understandable to them, and just be honest about it. That's it. It's better to be honest about it up front. Explain the policy, answer their questions, and build the rapport. And that's it. It's not rocket science. It's not. So you do those three things, you gain their trust, you build a little rapport with them, you put the policy out there as what it is, do not misrepresent it. And guess what? You'll have a client, and do your customer service with them. Call them once or twice a year, send them a card, send them a thank you, say hello, and you'll keep that client.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Larry, I thank you for your time. It was a pleasure. I'm glad we got to catch up this morning.
Me too,
And,
Joe. And feel better.
Thank you. I'm feeling okay, actually. I feel the Motrin starting to wear off, but it's kind of like a roller coaster. It comes in waves. Most of the time I'm fine.
Just
and then
yourself, okay?
and staying away, it's kind of weird. I'm in an empty house now.
Yeah, well, it's a strange time.
Yeah.
If you need me for anything, you know I'm always here.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.